You think men fall because of power, betrayal, or beauty. But you're wrong. Men break from something quiet or something women have always known and rarely name. 2,000 years ago, Marcus Aurelius wrote a sentence he feared would unravel entire empires. Freedom is never crowded. Then he buried it. But women never forgot. They didn't need philosophy to understand what silence does to a man's ego, how absence cuts deeper than argument, how detachment becomes dominance. This is the secret. A woman who walks away without explaining ... holds more power than a man who stays and shouts ... and every man at some point meets the echo of that line, not in a book, but in a message left on read, in a door closed without drama, in the realization that applause can't replace peace. The question is, will you hear the sentence before it's used on you? Rain strokes the asphalt like a musician testing the first hesitant notes of a requiem. You walk alone, collar raised, but the wind keeps folding the city's noise into your thoughts, asking questions you have dodged since childhood. Neon reflections smear across, puddles streaks of color that look suspiciously like warnings, and every traffic light lingers a breath longer than usual, as if the circuitry knows you are about to cross a line you can never return from. Woman's laughter breaks the hush behind you. Sharp, effortless, surgical. You feel it more than hear it, the way a knight once felt an arrow hum past his visor. Instinct stiffens your spine because some part of you recognizes that the laugh is aimed not at a joke, but at the armor men polish to hide the hollow beneath. You quicken your pace. The rain quickens too, drumming a countdown on signage, rooftops. Veins. 2,000 years dissolve in one blink, and marble corridors replace the avenue. Marcus Aurelius, emperor, philosopher, insomniac, sits beneath a guttering oil lamp, parchment shivering in his grip, ink dark as the Tiber at midnight. He writes 4 words, "Freedom is never crowded," then hesitates, realizing that if his generals ever read them, the legions might see obedience for what it is, rented courage. In the wavering light, he watches the sentence breathe like an animal, then seals it away, terrified of its hunger. You return to the street with those words burning inside your coat. Freedom is never crowded. They trail you through revolving doors, up elevator shafts, into glass-walled offices where power poses as certainty. They sit in every board meeting where the loudest voice compensates for an unexamined fear. They curl around whispered vows at weddings, around status updates, around every negotiation where one person mistakes possession for connection. Freedom is never crowded, and yet the crowd is everywhere. Listen closely. You are already breathing the storm. The sentence has traveled farther than any army, passing from papyrus to monastery marginalia, from printing presses to midnight texts that end relationships with surgical precision. Most men meet it too late, after the promotion, after the mortgage, after the rings heavier than they look. By then the armor is welded on, and the laugh you heard in the rain slips through the visor like smoke. If a single woman recalls the sentence, she doesn't need force. The syllables do the breaking for her. Tick, tock. Every raindrop hitting the pavement is another second removed from your illusion of safety. Tick, tock. The moment you assume tomorrow would resemble today is already sliding into the gutter. Tick, tock. She may voice the words, or worse, remain silent and let you feel them. Freedom is never crowded. Say it aloud and notice how each syllable leaves room for only one heartbeat at a time. Yours. There is still time, but not much. The city hides its clock in reflections. Swipe, scroll each gesture, a vote for distraction. Tonight, refuse that. Bargain. Stand beneath the rain, taste the metal of anticipation, and decide what survives when everything borrowed is called back dot. So the question takes shape like lightning behind clouds. Why does one idea give a single woman more leverage than a legion? And a sharper one lurks beneath it. Will you notice the tea? They thought the words were ash. Roman scribes swore the parchment had been burned beside the Tiber, its smoke lost among funeral pyres and incense. Yet fragments surfaced in a 6th century monastery tucked high in the Apennines, copied by a novice who signed only with a cross. He slipped a page behind a psalter, fearing that to free the mind is to threaten the throne. Centuries later, a crusader carried the manuscript to France, where cathedral librarians stamped it heretical not for blasphemy, but for inviting soldiers to question the obedience they mistook for honor. The scroll vanished again, it re-emerged. In Victorian London, a suffragette typesetter found a Latin paraphrase while printing pamphlets on women's voting rights. She translated the line onto the back of every leaflet. Freedom is never crowded. Police raids shredded most copies, yet a few survived, taped inside bedroom mirrors where daughters practice speeches their fathers forbade. The ink migrated, invisible but alive, across oceans inside trunks of migrants who sought space only to learn that new worlds still expected old silences. During the Cold War, CI analysts highlighted the phrase in a Kremlin defector's notebook. Soviet propagandists, alarmed by its subversion, recast it into warnings against Western selfishness, hoping to inoculate young comrades. But the lines slipped Soviet borders on bootleg vinyl, whispered between guitar chords and smoky basements. Each repression became advertisement. Every attempt to bury the maxim fertilized deeper soil. Fast forward. A Silicon Valley intern inserts the quote into back-end code as an Easter egg, triggering the pop-up, mask number 1 off, when users scroll for too long. TikTok editors stitch the sentence over slow-motion footage of breakups, urging viewers to choose solitude before suffocation. Instagram influencers tattoo the mantra along collarbones. Motivational hustlers print it on minimalistic hoodies. The algorithm boosts anything that hooks emotion, and nothing hooks harder than the promise that walls around us were self-erected. Data rarely lies about heartbreak. A study scraping 500,000 phone screens found that 73% of breakup texts cite loss of freedom within the first 3 lines, often before love, money, or infidelity appear. Screenshots betray the pattern. I need space. I can't breathe. I feel trapped. The Roman emperor was right. 2 millennia later, suffocation still ends more bonds than betrayal. Status may tempt, but captivity erodes. DR Hustle Recap. Status is currency. Authenticity is gold. The world trades on the former but starves for the latter, and the exchange rate grows harsher every year. You, reading this script, stand in the same lineage as the monk, the suffragette, the coder. If the sentence lingers in your mind, mask number 1 off, ask, What skin you're willing to shed to keep it alive. Odds are someone in your orbit hopes you never utter it aloud. Their comfort depends on your silence. Yet history proves that ideas built for confinement learn to pick locks. They travel lighter than armies and faster than broadcasts, burning every label meant to quarantine them. So inhale carefully. Those 4 words have already colonized your bloodstream, mapping exits out of rooms you did not know were cages. Exhale, and each breath becomes a quiet rebellion against scripts inherited, friendships overstayed, ambitions outsourced to social validation. Your ancestors smuggled this line across deserts, oceans, algorithms, and secret police so it could land in your throat today. The next decision you make will decide if the journey was worth it. If the ink keeps resurfacing, what else has been hiding in plain sight? Rap before she speaks or only after your armor shatters. An fMRI chamber hums like a mechanical heartbeat, while neon coils ignite the darkness behind your eyelids. Scientists at the University of Zurich ask male volunteers to view snapshots of strangers ranked by salary and social reach. In milliseconds, the ventral striatum, the pleasure vault of the brain, spikes when the subject believes he outranks the face on screen. Yet the scan shifts the moment another man's resume flashes higher. Blood flow dives, dopamine production stalls. Status threat registers not as disappointment but as a micro-mourning, identical to the signal triggered by literal physical pain. The cortex scrambles to reclaim pride, but chemistry betrays urgency first. Across the hall, a second study runs the inverse test on women. Electrodes track eye movement, noting how quickly pupils dilate at subtle markers of male insecurity. Dropped shoulders, wavering tone, inconsistent storytelling. Female brains light up in the temporal parietal junction, an area wired for spotting deception and emotional microfractures. Where the male cohort chases hierarchy, the female cohort maps fragility. Pattern recognition becomes a silent ledger of command leverage. They can see which wall paint is load-bearing and which is decorative ego. Tick-tock. Every belief you fail to examine is aging like milk behind the fridge light out of sight, souring by the hour. Neuroscientists call it hemispheric default. The brain saves calories by locking in early narratives, then defends them like territory. Childhood praise, locker room banter, promotion metrics, each one leaves a traceable groove. The more grooves you collect, the narrower your neural canyon grows, and the harder fresh water can reroute its flow. The countdown is chemical, not poetic. By 30, synaptic pruning has trimmed half the possible branches you could have climbed. By 40, myelin sheaths around your favorite stories become insulation against anything that contradicts them. The myth of self-made identity? Mostly fossilized shortcuts. In 2023, a meta-analysis of 82 imaging papers compared male self-esteem triggers with female threat detectors. Conclusion: men require visible proof of ranking to maintain baseline serotonin. Women require credible narratives to trust ranking at all. Translation: he shows his crown, she tests for the crack. That dynamic explains why a 4-word sentence can topple monuments. Freedom is never crowded. The phrase severs the dopamine pipeline. If authentic liberty counts more than applause, the scoreboard suddenly glitches. The brain, starving for certainty, floods cortisol through the bloodstream. Flight or freeze sets in not because the idea is violent, but because it refuses to submit to measurement. Remember the suffragettes' mirror? That handwritten maxim wasn't merely ideology, it was a neurological tripwire. Mirror nur nuns. Fire when we observe intent in others. A single glance at the phrase tells the hierarchical brain there is an exit door inside the game, and once an exit is perceived, the game loses absolute authority. The dominant structure must either upgrade or punish. History shows it usually chooses punishment first. Tick-tock. Beliefs untouched become rot. Omissions become architecture. Every morning you delay the audit, the neural canyon deepens, and novelty must detour kilometers just to reach your conscience. Brains crave certainty. Sentences like this delete certainty. Corporate workshops sell mindset hacks promising to recharge male confidence in 90 minutes. None address the biochemical truth. Validation is borrowed electricity, and blackouts are inevitable. Therapy. Apps encourage journaling, yet seldom provoke rebellion against the scoreboard itself. Even mindfulness influencers monetize serenity metrics, turning stillness into shareable clout. The market depends on your need to compare on that striatum spike, on that crash, on the cycle repeating louder. Coleman's 2024 longitudinal study followed 1,200 executives after forced sabbaticals, those who detached from performance ranking. For 60 days displayed a 45% baseline drop in status craving and a parallel 20% rise in creative risk tolerance. The limbic system recalibrated. Their nervous laughter vanished. Meanwhile, peers scrolling stock tickers on day 4 relapsed into identical dopamine cliffs as before. High-speed UI-Fi outpaces neuroplasticity every time . So pause the feed. Feel the phantom tug of a scoreboard you never built. The sentence is already in circulation. Each repetition loosens the canyon walls, inviting floods you may not control. Liberation is rude to habit, but biology doesn't negotiate. It rewires without apology. How many thoughts you call your own were really installed to keep you obedient? The boardroom glass was thicker than bulletproof, yet one stray phrase pierced it like a pin through silk. During an earnings call, the CFO joked that their visionary CEO was married to the share price. Nervous laughter. One analyst typed the line on X. Within 48 hours, the stock dipped 9%. Not from revenue loss, but from recognition. Investors realized their hero's identity fed on external applause. The CEO spent nights refreshing sentiment. Dashboards, dopamine spiking at green arrows, collapsing at red. He tried live-streamed pep talks, brand redesigns, even a TEDx on servant leadership. Nothing hardened the shell that single sentence cracked. Eventually, the board replaced him with someone whose ego was less famous, more forgettable, and therefore paradoxically safer. All it took was a comment, and the empires in his head toppled like dominoes he never noticed were standing. 17. Centuries earlier, in a Roman camp beyond the Danube, General Marcellus ate alone after victories, polishing medals while the legion drank wine by torches. A wandering philosopher records, call him Telesinus, recited a riddle. Who commands the swarm, the bee who stings or the bee who leaves? Marcellus laughed it off until night quieted the camp. The question returned, knowing, if obedience, relied on fear of his anger? Did he truly command or simply sting louder? 3 weeks later, scribes found his tent empty. He had deserted with a fraction of soldiers, crossing into barbarian territory where command was earned each dawn, not inherited at dusk. Roman historians labeled him traitor, yet border legend says he never again raised a banner bearing a single name least of all his own. If this strikes home, type mask number 1 off below. Public pledges seem trivial, but neuroimaging shows that stating intent aloud drags private neurons into communal daylight, forcing the brain to update its self-portrait. It's why confession booths ease guilt, and why wedding vows feel heavier than love letters. A keyboard declaration rewrites the subtle code your mind uses to predict your next action. Once spoken, you either align with the words or feel the pain of cognitive dissonance. Every mask number 1 off turns viewers from spectators into participants, drafting them into a conspiracy against borrowed identities. We stand near the 3,000-word cliff. Look down. Who wrote the rules you wake up obeying? Who benefits when you fear the silence between notifications? Suspense gnaws at the edges because the countdown is invisible. Credibility erodes one shrug at a time. Courage calcifies every morning it is postponed, and tomorrow's regret is already born in today's small surrender. T.L. Dr. Hustle Recap. Write your own code before someone hacks it. Legacy means nothing if the source file is corrupted. Imagine a life no one can repossess. Imagine measuring success by the depth of your nights, not the width of your audience. But freedom invoices you in advance. Friendships that prefer your old software. Reputations addicted to your compliance. Luxuries that lose flavor once they stop impressing strangers. You will pay when you refuse to sting on command, when a single sentence reveals you were never the swarm's master, only its loudest echo. What will you risk to own a life no one can confiscate? A hurricane approaches Florida. One highway funnels 3 million people north, taillights pulsing like a single bloodstream. No one votes on which side of the road to use. Conformity makes the exodus possible. The same instinct guides strangers to form rescue chains, passing infants over flooded ditches with a choreography no general could script. In these moments, the herd is not the jailer. It is the arc. Military historians note that even Marcus Aurelius, patron saint of self-rule, trusted his legions to hold the Danube line. Individual bravery mattered, but coordinated shields mattered more. Cohesion turned philosophy into policy, turning vulnerable frontiers into silent walls. Remove discipline, and the marble cities he protected might never have outlived a single winter. Neuroscience echoes the lesson. Infants synchronize heartbeats with caregivers long before they recognize their own names. Oxytocin floods a newborn's system when a parent mirrors facial expressions, wiring security into memory far below language. This primal compliance is not oppression. It is the scaffolding on which later autonomy will climb. Without early attachment, freedom mutates into rootless wandering identity, becomes a passport nobody stamps. Sociologists at MIT examined crowd movement after the 2015 Nepal earthquake. When 1,000 people shared a narrow bridge, individuals who tried to carve solo paths slowed the flow by 40%. Those who matched stride and spacing cut evacuation time in half. Conformity weaponized against chaos saved lives that radical self-expression would have forfeited, yet the ledger flips if unity ossifies. The same oxytocin that bonds a tribe can blind it to outsiders. Disaster drills morph into dogma. Armies forget why the war was declared. Freedom without fraternity decays into nihilism, but fraternity without freedom calcifies into tyranny. The paradox is permanent. A spine too rigid snaps. A spine too soft dissolves. Liberty without roots becomes drift. We inherit both dangers. Social media engineers tribal reflex at broadband speed, rewarding groupthink while pretending to celebrate individuality. Meanwhile, self-help gurus preach detachment, so extreme it risks vacuum. True autonomy is neither isolation nor obedience. It is the capacity to choose allegiance consciously, to plug in and unplug without losing signal to self. Consider jazz. Each musician masters scales alone, then enters a circle where unspoken rules ignite improvisation instead of chaos. Descent becomes harmony because all players share the rhythm's skeleton. Freedom lives, fraternity breathes, and neither suffocates the other dot. So test every banner you stand beneath. Ask whether it shields you from storms or merely hides your horizon. Community should be a dock, not an anchor. A hinge, not a handcuff. Remember that Marcus marched with legions, yet meditated in tents, keeping counsel with silence even as drums summoned armies. So how do you keep community without selling your spine? Rain again, yet something has shifted. The drops no longer drum a deadline on steel and glass. They rinse the city, polishing every surface to a truthful shine. The sentence that once felt like acid on armor freedom is never crowded, now feels like clear water on fogged glass, revealing contours you lost beneath condensation. Tonight the storm is not a threat. It is a solvent dissolving excuses that hardened into invisible bars. Begin small. True revolutions start as micro-rebellions. Opt out of the algorithm's autoplay for 24 hours. Reclaim the right to press play when you decide stand in a queue without lifting your phone, letting stillness pierce the itch to perform. Decline a meeting whose only purpose is to prove presence. Watch how quickly people respect time you guard with silence. Each act is a needle loosening the thread that stitches you to scripted. Obedience.now confront the mirror with 3 ruthless questions. Whose dream am I funding with my fatigue? Which opinion do I parrot because the cost of disagreement scares me? What would I do tomorrow if applause were impossible? Write the answers, then burn the page. Ash remembers, and your nervous system will feel the funeral. Graduation arrives with the 24-hour silence test. Say nothing disposable for a full day, no half-hearted. Yes, no courtesy laugh, no filler that cushions awkward pauses. Speak only when the sentence is worth carving into stone. The first hour's itch. By evening the itch turns revelation. You measure how often you dilute truth to protect decor. When the test ends, ordinary speech feels congested and clarity tastes like oxygen. Many never return. Moment of declaration. Whisper both mantras aloud. Freedom is never crowded. Mask number 1 off. Feel how the first clears a path and the second demands you walk it. The phrase that once unstitched your armor now guides your compass. If a room grows too tight for honesty, the room is the cage, not your courage. Every heartbeat that stays loyal to the mantra becomes a lantern for someone still negotiating. With darkness, reimagine that opening rain one last time. See it cleansing a narrow alley until the asphalt mirrors starlight. There where fear once pooled, you catch your reflection uncompromised, wearing nothing borrowed. You notice the silence, and it does not accuse. It applauds. If a single line can break you, imagine what owning it can build. Curiosity was the spark, a midnight laugh carving silence, an emperor's ink smoldering beneath marble. Tension followed status threats in neural firestorms, CEOs. Unmasked by throwaway jokes, legions quaking at a riddle. Realization struck when 4 words punctured the scoreboard. Proving freedom cannot be measured in likes, ranks, or marching orders. Release arrived as rain turned solvent, dissolving. Every obligation rented from fear. Where does that leave you? At the doorway between borrowed programming and handcrafted code. One step forward requires an audit only you can perform. I have built a freedom worksheet, 10 ruthless prompts, 24 quiet hours, 0 spectators. Download it, lock your phone, and trace the origins of each belief until ownership is undeniable or abandonment is inevitable. Remember the pattern. Ideas that survive emperors, algorithms, and shame work because they recruit accomplices. Your next accomplice might be the stranger who scrolls past this video and sees your pledge glowing in the comments. Algorithms amplify noise. Rebellions amplify. Example.comment. Mask number 1 off. Claim your worksheet below and subscribe if you choose freedom over applause, because tomorrow the clock starts for you again.